Peace and blessings. This is Misael Bay, aka Warlock Asylum, coming at you once again with another episode of Raw Talk. And today I just want to discuss a couple of things about what Ninzuwu is. Ninzuwu is a mystical warrior path. It's the study of warrior mysticism, and you could ascertain that by some of the titles of the books, like the Arm of Amaterasu, or terms that we use like the Sword of Ninzuwu and Ghost Dragon Kodama. There's the Bushido. It's basically a spiritual approach to warrior ethics and to serve those things in honor and in a justified format. There is a specific gnosis of Ninzuwu that has initiatory rites as held out in the ivory tablets of the Crow. And in the acquisition of that initiation, there are certain processes that could be utilized and that really come together strongly. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Also, too, the art of Ninzuwu advocates Ko-Shinto, a purest form of Shinto, but a world Shinto. So it's not just dealing with the pantheon in Japan, but it's recognizing itself, speaking of the art of Ninzuwu, as a continuation of the Pole Star School. The Pole Star School deals with a long tradition of paradigms and spiritual systems that evolve around the gnosis of inculcating energy from the Pole Star and the Big Dipper constellation, which is signature to such civilizations as Egypt, Sumeria, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Mesoamerica world, traditions in Africa. Everything ultimately revolved around the Pole Star in its shift from Thuban to Polaris. That's the gnosis. So a lot of times other things are examined in Ninzuwu that may appear to be a amalgamation of another form of spirituality. For example, the Yijing Apocrypha of Genghis Khan, studying the Taoist, its perspective of, those rites. And it's all part of one spiritual gnosis. That's how it's looked upon in Ninzuwu. Ninzuwu doesn't look at, it does clearly define a lot of the rites that were part of the Pole Star School, but it doesn't include everything, evidently, but it does honor the traditions that preceded it in the Pole Star School gnosis. And the reason for this is that, based upon the vibration of the Pole Star, which is subject to change due to different longitude and latitude. So from the Ninzuwu mindset, the Aztecs were worshiping, in so many ways the same pantheon as the Taoists. It's just that those stars' light from the Pole Star is starkly different. So the vibration is going to be different, the names is going to be different, and a lot of aesthetics is going to be different based on the environment. And those aesthetics, the plants, the environment itself was produced based upon that difference. So that's how we look at it as in Ninzuwu. Ninzuwu, also one tenet of Ninzuwu that has to be understood is that that life, the mind of life, is the creator. We don't view deities, anything can be a deity, but in the typical sense of what monotheism or even polytheism terms as deities, we never see that as the creator or the source of all things. It's the mind of life itself. And gods are either ancestors, other forces of influence, or they're the principles that the mind of life is using to implement certain things in the human progression. Another aspect about Ninzuwu is that we don't believe, well, we believe that racial classification is the mark of the beast, or pretty much the design of negative forces, and that humanity goes through uh, four distinct periods, which are the hunting-gathering period, civilization, um, the global society, and celestialization. And as man is going through these stages, it's like a child becoming an adult. He's learning necessary lessons that he has to learn. Ninzuwu, another tenet is that we don't believe that any souls are taken away or added to the universe. They may be in a different part of the universe that is indifferent to our sensory perception, but no souls are added or taken away. Okay, a lot of the work in Ninzuwu is an internal work because man is a replica, a microcosm of the greater macrocosm of the universe. So a lot of lessons, if we work on ourselves internally, our psyche and our mental ability, we can gain a lot. And ultimately, the purpose of Ninzuwu is for a person to become enlightened in the state of what we call Ninzuwu, and to progress. One of the things that people have asked about is, our affiliation with the Black Dragon Fighting Society. We feel that it's one of the few martial societies that that does really speak about the spiritual continuity and principles along with warrior mysticism. So for what I mean to say is that Ninzuwu is, I don't know if it's the only, but it's one of the few spiritual paths that is a spiritual path based on warrior mysticism. So let me just make that clear. Now, there are a lot of texts that, I've written. Some of them are not relative to the art of Ninzuwu. Some of them are. A person who is in the art of Ninzuwu, as long as he follows the code of Ninzuwu and he practices the solar fire, he can integrate other activities into his spiritual gnosis, and there's teachings on how to do so. But the main thing is that he recognizes himself in the world as sort of like a working philosophy ultimately. Even though there's shamanic exercises, there's a calendar, all those things, there's a language, depends on how a person applies themselves. A lot of people who talk about Ninzuwu may not walk the path of Ninzuwu itself. They may read a couple of texts and agree with a lot of the different things and work in the workings with what their paradigm is, and that's great, but it is a martial spirituality, and it's based on world Shinto, or looking at the world through the Shinto lens, which pretty much Shinto is not somewhat of a religion in the sense of what people think, but it respects forces of influence upon the environment. For example, there may be a kami that rules over the car industry, and that's because cars are a force of influence. So this is something that rules over this force of influence, and that or influences the car industry, this thought, how this technology came into the world. And if it's put into a personified form of a spirit or a force, then it could be influenced in a direction that mankind will want to go, or that nation will want to go, so it's not dogma, and most of the publications concerning Ninzuwu is to teach a person how to align with the mind state of Ninzuwu. So it's that sort of thing. It is also centered on the practice of Amino Yukihashi, which is an essential component to Aikido. However, it could be utilized as a pathway itself. And we, really encourage people who are studying Ninzuwu. It's not necessity, because there are different paths within Ninzuwu itself. To, become familiar to the degree possible with Ame no Ikihashi. In Ninzuwu mind, the results and what one can demonstrate is ultimately the quest. So a lot of times people come along with socializations, maybe throwing pictures of Buddha around or whatever the case may be, and really none of those things really have anything to do with Ninzuwu. For some reason, anything time that there's an Eastern aesthetic, people want to throw Buddha in the mix, or just talk about stuff that is like a nice garden, which are nice things themselves, but doesn't really have to do with the gnosis. There's a huge gnosis in Ninzuwu that's talked about in the communities of Ninzuwu. Ninzuwu is very much more popular outside the United States than it is within the United States. The people who are familiar with it in the United States, a lot of them have touched upon it experimentally, and there is a couple of conclaves, you could say, in New York and other places, that in California, also in Washington, that really really purist when it comes to Ninzuwu. However, there's no and those are private organizations, I'm saying, people who study privately in groups, and then also outside the country is very huge in certain parts of Eastern Europe, the following of Ninzuwu. And that's pretty much a good thing, in the sense that they're able to gain some benefit, and also to make people aware of Ninzuwu. But it's very much a personal path as well. So what I mean to say is that it's not really revolving around a whole bunch of talking. There's some people who come and talk. Like, this system, I don't see where it has anything to do with other stuff, you know what I'm saying? Because of the gnosis of it is so defined, but it may seem so vast for people who don't practice. There's a lot of huge things to talk about in Ninzuwu. There's a lot of it's a full system, so there's a lot of stuff to discuss and things of that nature. It's not really for the spiritual people who like to toy around with spirituality. It's just not that cup of tea, and usually I won't even let people get past that door, based on how they're interacting with the material. The other thing I do want to talk about is connection to the invisible fist, to Black Dragon Ninjutsu, and also our relationship with Ashita Kim, which is also another pole star school. So we're going to work on making that umbrella a little bit more realistic. Ashita Kim has done a lot of work into what he's doing. Some people think that his material or whatever he's about is, whatever it is. I personally have always enjoyed his stuff, and, to really, put out the level of content that he has, also to be engaged as much as he has, dedicated as much as he has, not only to his own mission, but to, really getting the word out long before, certain martial forms became trend, is something to be commended. However, there is a stigma about him that people have tried to push him to the stake. But in my personal relationship, knowing him, he's always been like an honorable individual. And he's also been one to talk about the arts and his connection to the Pole Star School. One day I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But basically that's like sort of the connection, is understanding the history of the Pole Star School and how it came about. And this is where Ninzuwu's connection is. As far as like being a very old practice that's carried on today. Other things about Ninzuwu that I really liked, and that really, definitely defined it, is the paths itself. It could be taken as a whole path, which deals with learning the language, learning the martial form, learning some of the spiritual practices, or taking one of its aspects itself and coming into that path. Since we have been doing videos lately about the art of Ninzuwu with the ivory tablets of the crow and things of that nature, that's where I sort of began. I wanted to kind of discuss what Ninzuwu is ultimately, and that's a way of life. It's like I said, from the pathway of warrior mysticism, and it's a clean path that deals with the development of our personas, trying to maintain on a positive vibe and to help our situation ourselves, and based on that help society and other people. It's a beautiful system, and it's a lot that can be gleaned from it. Ninzuwu is open to people of different walks of life, different genres, different things of that nature. The only thing is that, we ask that your intent be pure, and that you really here to learn the information, you know what I'm saying? And also to inculcate it. Who wants to deal with a waste of time? No one really wants to deal with that. And that's basically about it. This is Misal Bay, and I would like to say Wafube to each and every person out there. And also have a good evening, and I'll catch you a little later. All right, ciao.